Wake up and let's go to the Mindless Morning Show.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mindless Morning Show. I'm here with my co-host Dakota, as always, and even better yet, we are joined by a true legend started from the pits of the orchestra all the way to one of America's most beloved composers of TV and film, Randy Edelman. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. Nice to be with you.
It's an absolute honor to be talking with you. I mean, you've accomplished so much.
Seriously. I only can do one thing. That's all I know how to do, sit behind the piano, and that's it. So,
well, you definitely mastered it.
Yeah, you do it damn well. So,
no, thanks.
I mean, it's amazing. I was looking at your whole list that you got going on, and
it's crazy.
I was immediately just full of enthusiasm and excited because I saw that you did the music for Drop Dead Fred, which is
oh my God,
one of my favorite movies growing up.
Yeah, well, that was well, I mean, I won't get into the whole thing, but my scoring movies, it was not a plan or a dream of mine. It had no kind of cachet about it when I was now it's like these kids go to school and they study film composing, which is a joke. You're basically a musician and you better have that end of it, and if you get into it, hopefully you can produce. But okay, the reason I'm telling you about that was kind of, so I did many other things before I scored films, but when I really got into it, Drop Dead Fred, it was this little movie. I never even heard of the company. The company was a company called New Line Cinema, which of course you've heard of now. But at that time, it was a low budget film, and they called me up about doing it. And I said, "Who's the director?" And the guy's first name was Ate, like I ate a grape, ATE. And I said, "Who the hell is this?" And it turns out, I think the story goes, I don't know really, they wanted Tim Burton to do it, but after like Beetlejuice and this, he was too hot. So why they went and got you pronounce it Atta, why they went to Holland to get a Dutch director who already, don't ask me. Anyway, he's a fantastic guy. I'm still sort of in touch with Atta. And you know what you should do? You should get in touch with Atta sometime. Atta Dionne, out of the blue. Just tell him, hey, you know what? Not now, not tomorrow, whenever, could be a year from now. We talked with Randy Edelman, and we just call him. He's a great guy. Anyway, but we did the film. They didn't have a budget, so I did it with two people. It's me and two people, and that's what the whole thing is. But I had a blast with it, though. Really, kind of, if you listen at the beginning, that kind of circusy main title, and they didn't have any main title. It was just like, okay, we've got 5 minutes of black, and I just I figured, hey, what the hell, it's just they don't, it was a very low key kind of thing. So sometimes that works out well because you take a chance, as opposed to it being some studio picture with somebody on your ass, with a preconceived temp score. So anyway, but I had a ball doing that. I don't know. That was the lead guy in that. I didn't know who he was, but he passed away, I think, like 2 or 3 years ago. He was a huge star in England, so that's where that was like a big film. Over here, not too many people saw it, but it was a really fun thing to do. And the director was he was really a very cool guy. I stayed friendly with him for years, and I'm still in contact with him.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, yeah. I would be ecstatic to
Atta Dionne, and believe me, he would love to hear from you. Believe me. He'd love to hear from anybody. I'm not giving, putting you up on a pedestal, but you know what I'm saying.
Oh, I'm consider me on the pedestal and ready to email. But I will say, because you had mentioned they initially wanted Tim Burton or Danny Elfman.
Yeah, but I didn't. Oh, well, that was, yeah. I mean, that would have gone that way if that happened. I don't really know, all these films. It doesn't matter what the film is, whether it's a comedy or whether it's a drama. If it's good or bad, it doesn't mean anything. They all have histories, long histories, and the thing can have a 25-year-old history, and it can be the silliest film there is. It doesn't matter. This is how these things are developed. It was with this studio. It was supposed to be with this person. A star backed out, then a producer backed out, then they lost their money. So a composer's the last guy in. That's what makes it sort of interesting, except it's like you're coming in to these people who, depending on what it is, have this long history on this, whether it's based on a book or a script or it's an original thing, and you come in and obviously you're making a big contribution, but you're not part of the family. You know what I mean? And by the way, it doesn't matter who you are. You'd say, oh, well, if these people have done no films and you've done 100 films or something, doesn't mean anything. It's like next, new, it's a new thing. So it makes it, like I said, it makes it kind of interesting. It's like there's a new guy at the door, and the new guy at the door has a whole agenda, depending on what the story is behind this film that the guy shot.
So when you say it's not like you guys are not really a part of the family, do you guys ever go on set or ever a part of that, or is it totally
No, you know what? You only go on set when you're working with a director who you've worked with before. No, composers come in late. Now, if I have worked with someone before and they're shooting their next movie or somewhere down the road and they want me to do it, yeah, I mean, I've been when we did with Vin Diesel XXX in Prague. I was there because I had done Dragonheart and the Bruce Lee story with Rob Cohn, and so yeah, I went there. But you know what? It's meaningless. It's like it's just a goof to go to these places because these films, it's so tedious when they make a film. It's like when the star is coming to do a scene. It's like an hour, like he's on his way from the hotel. He'll be here in a second. It's just BS. So I like to say, shoot the movie, get me a rough cut, and let me sit down and look at what the fuck this is. That's, I don't need to be there, although it sounds glamorous. You can be in a great city in Europe or wherever it is. But the fact is, you don't need to be there at all. And you don't need to read a script, because a script means nothing. It's because the style of the film is dictated by whatever this director, whoever he is, how he shot it and what he needs support from in terms of a score, music. So that's what you need. You don't need to go to some location, and hang out, while everybody gets nuts, and sits around in their trailers, drives me kind of crazy. And also, to be honest with you, some of these bigger films we do, it certainly, I'd say at the beginning or even more, it kind of makes you nervous because it's a huge responsibility, and suddenly you're going, depending on what the picture is, and it's kind of, in the end, it's going to come down to you in a room by yourself, even though they pepper you, drive you crazy with opinions and what things could be and their temp score and all that kind of stuff. It's so I'd rather be in my room, with my shit, my equipment, and like I said, watching it. You got to use a little, because it's got to be done fast. But I always say it's got to be. It can't be done fast and it's wrong, and it can't be done, slow. And it's got to be fast and you got to be right. And that's what people who do this, if they're, fortunate enough to be able to work in this, that's what they have to be able to do, or else you can't survive in it, because that's what you got to do, And you know.
So once you sit down with that rough cut as a composer, do you have all creative control of like what it all sounds like then, or
are you crazy? No, you have no control. Zero. Zero. You have no control. First of all, okay, yeah, you have control to do what you're going to do. Then let's just focus on the person in TV. It's different. That's a producer's thing. But I mainly did film. In film, it's a director. And then he comes by and starts fucking with whatever you did. But the big thing is, I'm trying to be concise about this stuff. It's when you do it based on, your ideas and what you've been pushed into doing from this other person, cajoled, then guess what? It's in their hands. And I'm not around. I don't go, you don't go to the mix, and they don't want you at the mix because then they have it and they can do whatever they want with it. And I mean, they can, especially now with the technology and all the tracks, they can, well, first of all, they cannot use many of the cues. In a film, there's, let's say, 50 cues. A cue is a piece of music that starts here and ends there. It could be 3 seconds long. It can be 8 minutes long. They can use it. They do not have to use it where you spotted it. Now there's a famous story for composers. Leonard Bernstein, who's obviously a brilliant composer. He had a friend, Aaron Copland, who was also a great composer. And Copland told Bernstein, when I think he was in school and he was studying music with him, that scoring films was a cool thing, and it was creative, and you could make money. And so this is something that he could do. And Bernstein scored one film on the waterfront, the great film On the Waterfront, and they fucked with his music. And Leonard Bernstein never scored one more picture. He wouldn't go near it. Now, he wrote musicals like West Side Story, but that was a musical that they made a movie of. That's different. But as far as scoring, because he freaked out when he heard the final film and he heard his music, which he meant, written for specific scenes, specific moments, and emotion. They screwed around with it, which is the nature of what it's been from the beginning when they started scoring films. And so he just completely flipped out. And basically, he never, ever, ever, he was probably 22 or 23 then. He never did it again. Wow. He did lots of other stuff, but not scoring films.
And how does that, like, what's your opinion of all of that?
Well, no, you know what? It's a collaborative medium. You can't, that's what the nature of it is. You can't, if you want to sit down and write a piece or write a song and you want it to be like you want it, then you don't get into film composing. You want to write a song and you want the song to be exactly like a mean, that's different, because songwriting has nothing to do with film composing or anything. That's a different animal. However, if you want to write a piece of music and you want it to be recorded the way you hear it, and in the end, and you want it to be the same, then write the piece and record it for a concert hall or something. But you're not going to be a film composer. You have to. When I say you have to be able to deal with it, the thing is, you don't deal with it. You do what you do, and you're pushed around and this and that. You go through it, and then they take it, and it's theirs. It's not yours. Now, I always was fortunate that most of my stuff once I got going, there'd always be a soundtrack. Now, on that soundtrack, at least when I recorded the score, now, of course, that's after the director or whoever has come by, but at least I recorded it. I would put it on the soundtrack like I wanted it, but it may not, there's pieces of music, maybe they're the best cues on the soundtrack that aren't even in the movie, or if they are, they're cut in half, or they're sped up, or they're all kinds of stuff. So that, that it sounds like I'm making out to be Terrible. It's not. It's a fantastic thing. It's challenging if you're up to it, and if you've got the musical background, which today people that do it come from a different place. They don't read or write music, a lot of them, which is fine. So I'm not belittling them. I just happen to have a serious conservatory background, but and had to learn all this new, the technical stuff and the equipment, which is great. But there's a different way of going about it now than the way it used to be. So,
okay, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, with all that being said, do you have a favorite project that you've worked on throughout all the years?
You know what? I do get asked that. I have to say no, because you know what? I have lots of favorite ones.
Yeah.
And they're all different styles. What I like about it, or it for me, is at the beginning, I was sort of pigeonholed, because you can't get into doing this. You have to have that. You've got to be ready to go and have your musical chops together and all that. And then, of course, what do you need? Just like in any other parts of this business, you need a break. You need a little luck.
Yeah.
Everybody has to have that piece of luck. How did John Williams meet Steven Spielberg? He met him a billion years ago. How did he meet him? On what? So that happened. That may be a very, not a good example, but the point is, so my luck after being in the music world 20 years and doing all kinds of things, whether it was my own albums or producing records or conducting for people or came with a guy named Ivan Reitman. Ivan Reitman, as he produced Animal House, he directed Ghostbusters and all that stuff.
Nice, okay.
And a tough character, by the way. It's really interesting. You meet these guys and they may do comedies, but guess what? It doesn't mean they're, and then you may meet a guy, and I'll give you an example, and he turns out to be like a beer drinking North London funniest fucking guy, and you wouldn't know that because his pictures, the guy I'm talking about there is Alan Parker, who unfortunately passed away a year or two ago, or maybe a year ago. Every time Alan Parker made a film, I would run down, because it doesn't matter if it was Midnight Express or Mississippi Burning or Fame or Shoot the Moon or Pink Floyd The Wall. Every one was completely different, but very basic. He had a certain. So when I got to work with him, I was, shaking in my boots, and he turned out to be, a real character. Whereas Ivan Reitman, not saying anything against him, I did 6 movies with him, but he's a very serious guy. There's no, lightening up, and his reward to you is, when you get done killing yourself, is he calls you for his next picture, which you may not necessarily want, but they're all different characters.
Nice.
But as far as is my, the one I like most, I could give you a list of, a dozen that I loved. I loved working on a little picture called My Cousin Vinny with Jonathan Lynn. Jonathan Lynn is a real interesting British guy from the theater. I didn't know who he was or anything. And when we made that film, it was just a little nothing. Nobody, just like when I made The Mask with Jim Carrey, and his Pet Detective movies hadn't come out. And it was a weird situation. Well, these movies are now classics. And they're not the ones with Reitman, The Kindergarten Cop, and Ghostbusters 2, and Twins, and all those. So what happened to me is, I suddenly was doing all these big comedies, but there was nothing funny. What I wrote, if you listen to the music, in most cases, it wasn't even funny, because all those comedies, there could be action comedies or romantic comedies. You have all different kinds of stuff. So what I did wasn't particularly funny in terms of my craft. However, so after I did that at the beginning, I was, of course, elated that my musical life came around to this, because musically it was so challenging and not like writing, the 3-minute hooky commercial song, which I had been doing. A lot of people think I'm that other person's son. Every other day they go, oh, Randy Edelman had those hits songs and hit records in Europe. And are you, was he your, I said, no, I was 22, 20, I was young, so what I had to do is consciously, which is easier said than done, consciously try to find things that obviously weren't comedies. And the first thing that I came across was a huge project for a guy named Ted Turner, who I had always been fascinated about. I mean, he's a guy who lived on his cot for 20 years trying to build and convince people to do a 24-hour news station, and everybody thought he was nuts. Of course, and he has a kind of interesting history. But this was and he was from the South and a big Civil War nut. And he had done this project, but it was done for his new station, which was called TNT. Now, after I had done some stuff, and it's like, I'm not going to write 14 hours of music for a miniseries for TNT. But, I ended up going and meeting him, and he's such a character, and he was so enthused. No way was I going to leave there and call back the next day and say, you know what, I don't want to do it, So I did that. And then that sort of led to Alan Parker, and then to a real character named Michael Mann, and that was Last of the Mohicans.
Nice.
Yeah. So, that's what I kind of, so after that, I kind of was, couldn't be pigeonholed exactly. But I still did, a lot of, I got a call once from this guy on Saturday Night Live, Adam Sandler, and he had just done this movie. And he said, I need you to do this movie because I've been using your stuff from whatever it was to temp it. And he sent me a little bit. And of course, it was the stupidest thing. So I said, you know what? I've been doing all these comedies. And he said, yeah, you got to come up to like Tucson or Phoenix to see this screening. Oh, shit. So I went up there and I could not sit through the screening. It was a public screening, with all these kids, with their backwards hats, and they were maybe 8, 9, 10, and loving it. And I had to leave because it was too embarrassing. Okay, the point is, Adam Sandler is a real talented dude, and he kind of knew what he was doing, but I had to get into it, which I did. And thank God I did. I tried to do all these things, and it turned out great because they're all like, every day they're on in every country in the world, and they turned out to be successful. And if you watch them enough, it's like something you thought like was totally nonsensical. You keep watching it, as of course you do when you're scoring the film, and suddenly you're laughing, you're seeing certain things. So I continued doing, comedies when I could. And I'm glad I did, to be honest with you.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. That's super cool.
So to kind of backtrack it just quite a bit, what got you started with everything, and what inspired you to take the path you did?
Well, nothing. Music. A kid playing piano. That's it. And you know what? Girls. Okay, I didn't know that. No, there's a girl's behind every good story, and I got a good one. Not right now because some of them are usually at every point. Okay, so I was a kid. I grew up right. If I look out, I'm like on the 53rd floor of this hotel, and if I look, it's dark now. If I look across out the window, I can see the Hudson River, George Washington Bridge, and I'm from right across Teaneck, New Jersey. Right across the bridge. Where are you?
I'm in Florida.
Okay, so all right, you don't know. It doesn't matter.
Kansas.
It does. Okay, yeah, you're. But so I grew up, and I had obviously some kind of musical gift, but my parents were like straight through. There was nobody in the music or show business, So they weren't like ever pushing me into this. And when I was a kid, it wasn't really cool. What was cool? Playing baseball. That was cool. Not playing the piano. But as time went on, and of course I studied really serious classical music. It was good because I had a practice and I developed a discipline, but I always loved listening to songs on the radio. And what I liked was, what I was really into wasn't so much necessarily the song, it was what's going on back there? Who's singing background? Who's playing the saxophone, or what is that? Or is that violins? But you know what I mean? It was the kind of arrangement which really intrigued me. Anyway, time went on, and then I realized when I got in high school, like, if there was a party and I could play all these songs, it was kind of a magnet, you know? So, and blah, blah, blah. And then I went away to school, and, you know, there were all these rock and roll bands, and, you know, I'd see these girls and I'd say, oh yeah, I gotta meet her. And then it's like one time I was practicing in a law library school that had a piano that I was practicing there, and there's somebody sitting in the back of the room, and who's sitting in the back of the room for some strange reason listening is this girl. And who was it? It was that girl in, you know, at the Mug Club or whatever the name of the place was, who was in the band. So of course she said, oh boy, you know, you're really good. And I said, yeah, you know, maybe I'll write a song. Maybe I'll play you some of my songs. I've never written a song in my life, you know. So she seemed to be open to it. So I wrote probably, you know, whatever, terrible song. And what I did is, this was now in Cincinnati, Ohio. I got kids from the music conservatory to go into a studio and play the backing, not just the band, the rhythm section, but I brought kids and I put, like, you know, 8 strings on it and a bunch of horns and stuff. And where was I recording? At an 8-track studio in a garbage dump in Cincinnati, Ohio. And the name of that place and company was King Records. And you know what King Records is, don't you?
Yeah.
James Brown and Bobby Blue Bland. And here I am, I was like maybe 16, this Jewish kid from New Jersey. I was out there. Long story why I was there, but I was like in pre-med in the school, and then in the music conservatory in the other. And so they just happened to be, and this was like a studio that in those days, in the back of the studio was this room, and you saw all these women pressing records. I mean, this was the days, it looked like they were at sewing machines, but they were at this thing and they were literally pressing records. So this is by chance. So these guys saw me, they saw this kid standing on top of the piano conducting. I mean, and at that time, the recordings, if you were making real kind of big records with a lot of production, was Chicago or Memphis. So if you wanted to do certain things with, or, you know, larger amount of instruments, you went there. So these guys saw me and they said, hey, we don't have to go there. We can call this kid. And so this funny, crazy thing started. Slowly but surely, I started going there every month, bringing kids from the school. They'd pay me like, maybe they'd give me $100. I'd pay the kids like literally like $5 a piece and bring them all down. I didn't have a car. Maybe 3 of them had a car, and we piled in. And of course, the kids from the conservatory loved it because it just, you know, and I would write out these very primitive charts. And so all I can say is by the time I got out of there 3 or 4 years later, I had a shitload of stuff in my bag. And I schlepped it into a music publisher in New York and said, listen to this. And, you know, blah, blah, blah. That's, you know, and so somebody reacted to it. And it was, you know, this is little stuff. and bit by bit, I did a lot of stuff. But as far as the, the films, that's later and wasn't any kind of dream of mine. The only thing that had happened by that time, the music business had totally changed in that, the record business, no longer, even though there were a few, it used to be, a music publisher bought a song to a, quote, record producer at Capitol Records, and then the record producer bought it to the artist he was producing, whether it's Frank Sinatra or someone else. And all these people, that was it. Now, suddenly 99% of the people selling records, I don't care if it was the Beatles or Bob Dylan or the Eagles or James, they wrote their own stuff. So if you were someone who had any inkling of songwriting, there was nobody. There were a few people, but very few people to take your stuff to. Therefore, what did you have to do? You had to do your own shit.
Yeah.
But I had never sung before in my life. So I was out on the road conducting for people. I was really young. And I always I started hearing these, albums, like Elton John's first album. And I heard all these beautiful orchestrations by a guy named Paul Buckmaster. And also there were many. And so that's what I circle back, what I told you a half hour ago, listening to songs on the radio and me kind of listening to what was going on, not just the song, but the production of it. So that was what was happening. And I wrote a bunch of things. And at that time, this change had taken place, if you could carry a tune and write a decent fucking melody, you could get a record deal. Now that's overstating it, of course, but basically that's what I did. And did my first album, and that was, I had no idea it would go on and on and on. I figured, and I signed my name to, I signed the form, like a 5-year contract for nothing. But I figured, which is always the way I've always felt, I'll do it and nothing will happen, and then I will have done it, And that's sort of, that was my MO. But that's not the way it happened. Now, my album didn't sell as far as me as an artist, nor did the subsequent ones, that somehow, because of what was going on and people doing the songs, I was able to create enough interest that I kept getting these deals, record deals. But what happened with the first one? Remember, I just told you the people selling records, as you, of course, know, at a certain time, 90% of them were people who did their own songs. And there were a couple of people, I'm not talking about Barbra Streisand or Frank Sinatra, these people were still selling some records. But there was somebody who was selling more records than anybody. And they were the complete antithesis of what was going on at the time, which was whatever, the Eagles, Bob Dylan, James. And they were a brother and sister. And their name was the Carpenters. And somehow, I won't get into the story, they heard this album of mine, my first one, that no one really ever heard, for a little record label. And Richard, the brother, who was really a good pianist and arranger, and really related to it. And they not only recorded a couple of my songs, which was, of course, incredible, they said, why don't you come out and be our opening act? Now, you got to understand, these people, these weren't concerts like even at Carnegie Hall or place. These were athletic. These were things in field, big time field houses. That's how they were. And so that was my first concert. And then I went on tour with them like, it was crazy. The only good thing is, though normally you would say, Jesus, you never even sung. My mother never heard me sing. I mean, I had done the album, but all I knew was those 10 songs on that album. It's not like I had a repertoire or anything. The only thing was, If I was put in a club situation and I was sitting there playing the piano and there was an audience, I may have been nervous, but these places were obviously so big and the stage, I was removed and the lights were so hot and it was such a big thing that I didn't relate at all to 15,000 people sitting there. I was just sweating it, getting through my 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I'll end this part here. So now I do maybe 4 or 5 concerts with them. Or we were at these like colleges and stuff out sort of west. And then one day I get a call from, one of these agencies who I had to be with, like the William Morris Agency, which is now, called something else. And they say, hey, your next concert isn't till, let's say, next Tuesday. And maybe it was a Thursday. And I said, yeah. So, and meanwhile, I was like high as a kite because I had done 4 or 5 of these. It was insane. Yeah. I went from zero, zero to, and they said, we have somebody that you can open for. So I said, well, they said, and you can do it. They're another client of ours, and they're going to be in blah, 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 Phoenix or wherever tomorrow, in 2 days. And so you show up. Now, who is it? Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention.
Nice.
Now, okay, you cannot obviously go from one audience like the Carpenters to the exact opposite audience like Frank Zappa. But I didn't have any flexibility. I only knew the fucking 10 songs on that album. And that's all I could do. I wasn't a performer. So I said, okay, and all I can tell you is from me sitting in front of 15,000 people, kind of quiet, a little respectful, even though they didn't know who I was. Now I'm with the Mothers of Invention. You can imagine those people throwing shit, screaming at, what the fuck, get off the stage, Meanwhile, it was also great because it was just so ridiculous. So I had some kind of funny experiences with that,
Nice.
That's awesome.
That sounds hilarious.
and the first place that I did was called the Celebrity Theater. It's a well-known place in Phoenix. And I went out and I started doing the stuff. I didn't even look up because the people were throwing shit and screaming. I was just doing those 10 songs. But I didn't know it had it's famous because it was one of the first, a revolving stage. But I didn't know it was revolving because this thing is moving like really, really slow. And I never looked up. There was all Zappa's equipment around me, and I'm looking at my watch. I got to do 45 minutes. So if you can picture this, which is hard. If I was sitting with you, I could show you and you would realize and it'd be more funny. So I walked out from behind, call it behind the stage. I walked out to a piano. I sat down and I did my thing. So what do you do when you're done? You get up and you turn around and you walk out exactly where you came from. Guess what? You ain't there.
It wasn't the same place.
You're in and obviously and the audience who hated me and were screaming anyway realized because I didn't have any place to go. There was no backstage. And so I jumped into the audience, maybe it was about a 3 or 4 foot thing. It wasn't so shallow. And I walked up the aisle. People were screaming and laughing. And I got a hot dog. That was,
I got a hot dog.
And then listen, yeah, no, I did. And then I circled back, got my shit, and got the last flight out of that city, figuring I'm never going to hear from these people again. And that's fine. Wouldn't you know, like a day or two later, they said, okay, your next concert with Zappa is in Dallas. And I said, what? And the reason was I was easy. They didn't have to do anything. I was a guy at a piano that they didn't have to deal with me. He didn't care if anybody could be standing up there,
That's too funny.
All right. That's just so great. That's way back history. Anyway,
that's good stuff. So
sorry. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny.
Yeah, for sure. With all that you've accomplished, and now you are branching out on your own as like a solo artist. You got a new single coming out soon?
Well, yeah. Listen, I had a long history making these albums that finally happened big time in England. No reason why. I mean, they speak English, but that happened. So in other words, it pushed my thing years and years and years of. I did an album for Rocket Records, Elton John's label in England. Then I went to Sweden for Polar, ABBA's company. I kept going. I would have ended up like in Russia. And then finally I said, you know what? This ain't going to happen. I've had lots of great stuff happen and hit records of my songs, all that stuff with Weekend in New England and with the Patti LaBelle, but I wanted to do other things. So when eventually I got into films, people always would say, hey, how come you're not writing a song for the film? Now, in this day and age, there aren't any songs in movies. People do finished records that if it fits, someone will pick it and it comes in a certain scene of the film or at the end of the movie. But nobody's writing like Moon River anymore, So I didn't want to know from songs for like 25 years. I never knew a song, and the director doesn't need me to write a song. They need me to help their scene work. But then, recently I started screwing around. I always loved to write songs. So to answer your question, yeah, during the whole COVID thing, I was doing lots of stuff. I started writing some songs, and I came up with this song. Basically, the title is, there's a title, but my title is Grab Your Hat, Put Your Best Suit On. That's the title. But it's called Coming Out the Other Side, but really Grab Your Hat, Put Your Suit On. And it's a fun little pop rocker. It's not a serious song about ill. And I did it all myself in my backyard studio, and I had a blast. And I when I got done with it, it was like, what am I? And I played it for a bunch of people, and everybody, they liked it. So I made a deal with this company, the cool people here in New York. And so they're putting it out, next week or 3 days or something. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Coming Out the Other Side, baby. Randy and the Rockets. No, it's really a group. It's a group, but of course I'm the group, or maybe the Rockettes, but yeah. So that's what it is. And it's fun. It's a fun track, and it's only me. And that's what it is. It's not like one of my serious ballads, or it's not like that at all.
You're not going to take it further and continue doing it?
No. You mean doing the songwriting?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, I probably will, especially if anything, it's all different now. I mean, it's not, you don't take songs to radio stations and now, it's social media, and you got to get on, all these things. You guys know better than I do. And so I'll see what happens. But right now it's a certain point. A couple of years ago, I may have said, oh God, because basically I never wanted any of these directors or producers to know that I ever did albums or write songs, because had any one of my things been successful in the United States like they were in England, I wouldn't ever have been able to score a film, because it's I can't explain it. It's a really tight-knit thing, and they wouldn't have taken me seriously as a composer. I'm serious. I'm talking about one of these pop ditties that yeah. So they didn't, the directors, only the ones who I worked with who may have been from England, they not only knew the songs, but other than that, which was that was very few out of all the films I've done, no one had a clue. And I would never mention it, and I just never did it. So, now it's kind of cool,
I mean, going back, it was just a simple Google search of your name, and you could just see almost immediately the impressive repertoire you have. And it's fascinating that one person can even achieve so much in a lifetime. Not even a full lifetime. I mean,
you're
still
thank you.
young and kicking, man.
Yeah,
Well,
I just,
my lifetime.
I always basically was, people say, what do you do? I don't say I'm a film composer. I was always really appreciated the value of being a really good musician. I worked hard at it, made sure my left hand and right hand could be coordinated and I could write and read anything. And all the different things that I got involved with early on, sort of even making albums and being able to learn how to work in the studio before I did films, in a recording studio, helped certain kinds of things that I ended up doing. So, and my classical training helped in conducting the orchestras, like when I go to London and I do the scores at Abbey Road with the London Symphony, just a blast. Because most film composers, by the way, they don't know how, they don't conduct their own score. Somebody conducts their music, which to me is like, that's crazy. That's like part of my thing. So, yeah, so I just, and I like going from one thing to the other. I like that, changing it up, but not quickly, not like today, I spend a long time in a certain area and then I kind of move on. But I use what I learned, hopefully some of the value of whatever it was I was doing, and I incorporate it. And all those comedies, there's like really cool hip stuff. And, My Cousin Vinny is a Southern rock. It's not really a score. It's like an Allman Brothers thing, but that's what it needed. And I was able to do it, hopefully in a really fun and authentic way, and then something else may be, the most serious 20th century avant-garde classical thing. And that's what I like. That's why I've liked doing it, because it was, in different areas. And all the Asian, I got, just like the comedies, I got known after the Bruce Lee story Dragon and all the Jackie Chan, Shanghai Noon, Shanghai Nights, and Van Damme with a Crest. I was doing all this Asian stuff, loving it, bringing in these groups with all the authentic instruments. And so that was all these different kinds of sounds incorporated into, scoring a film that somebody wrote and came up with an idea and then hired some asshole to direct it who ruined it.
So I know earlier you had very briefly mentioned that you were pre-med also. So if music had not worked out for you, did you have like a secondary passion or see yourself where you would have been?
The pre-med thing would have never, no. I couldn't. Forgetting about the flight, the fact that I can't, getting a shot, or the sight of blood, I faint. Just even, those labs I used to do in high school, or, you dissect something, I don't know. It wouldn't have happened. It was the piano. Now, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to be playing at bar mitzvahs, but it was either that or, I wasn't going to become a CPA like my dad. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. I mean, that always seems to be the process, following along with parents. And it's the ones that break out are the ones that usually find the most joy in what they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you gotta. Yeah, listen. Absolutely. The luckiest people in the world are people who have whatever it is, a passion that can somehow pursue it, and that being their livelihood. That's lucky, and I consider myself lucky. And sometimes you can't do that, and you can have a passion and maybe have it your whole life, and not have that be your work. But if you can. I always think that I'm lucky, because listen, most people I know, then my friend, it's not like that. They go someplace, maybe it's great, but it's not a passion. They're going to some kind of, job somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a big difference, especially with just mental health. If you're doing something you enjoy, rather than you're sitting there just constantly bunkered down by the same old routine. Yeah. And I mean, you have a completely different routine, a whole different music piece for what seems like so many. How do you manage to keep so different uniqueness across all these different songs?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the films, films, they present themselves. You look at it and there is there are images and characters and storylines. And that, when I say that's easy, it's not easy if you don't have that facility to do that, because you have to in order to do that kind of work. But so you don't really have to think of what to come up with in the general sense, the style of what you're doing. Someone has done that, and then you have to be able to enhance that and just add to that. You can't do something that's like, oh, I have a great idea, and it has nothing to do with the image. As far as songs, I always like to, a lot of times, because I wasn't really into poetry, or I wrote songs about things that happened to me. That's what like and this new thing now, this my COVID ditty, I call it. It's about something that's going on, so I like that. Now I've written songs. I mean, the songs I like the most are always things that were, based on personal, sometimes a personal tragedy. I mean, a girl dumped me, and I wrote Weekend in New England. When will, Jesus Christ. I mean, again, and who would ever dream that this guy, Barry Manilow, picks it up and becomes a #1 record? The song I wrote with Patti LaBelle became the #1 hip hop. I got 3 years ago, I had the biggest hip hop and R&B record with Nelly. That was he took my track. It's like a story. How the hell did you do? I recorded a song for my album, the most romantic ballad thing. Patti LaBelle got it and did a screaming 8-minute version of it. It was sort of, in those days, it was the end of, there were still regional, special stations. So you could have an R&B hit. And then 20 some odd years later, Nelly in St. Louis, it gets a hold of this song he likes from this greatest hits of Patti LaBelle and starts screwing around with it. And it was a monster hit. And there's like 18 writers on it, on his half, but my half is just me. So that's all I care about. It's just like, no, you couldn't make that story up. But what I'm saying is the songs have stories too. I've got, the girl from ABBA, when they broke up, when she did her first record, her first single was the song that I went over there when I had to deal with them to record. It's kind of interesting stuff. I mean, Bing Crosby dropped dead on a golf course in Spain. And 3 days before that, he had recorded a song of mine that I wrote about my grandparents. Now, you have to understand, my grandparents wouldn't know, and they were still alive at the time. They wouldn't know if I said, Elvis Presley recorded, so that they wouldn't know anything. There's only one person in the world who was the biggest singer of their generation and sold more records than anybody, the Beatles, and that was Bing Crosby. So I told them, I said, hey, I wrote this song. And a year later, I still don't know how Bing Crosby recorded the song I wrote about my grandparents. And so can you imagine when I played it? Here's the song about you, Grandma and Grandpa. And that's a very nice song. Who the fuck is singing it? The only voice of their White Christmas. I mean, Bing Crosby. So amazing. That was cool. And listen, and then I'll close with this, because I'm gonna get a big laugh out of you guys. So my grandmother, now they were old, but they got it. They got the story of the song, which is really the story of my grandfather, where he started out in New York and did this and that, and then he met my grandmother, and it's concise, but it's that's the kind of song it is. And it got done, and they were, like, what they were reacting to wasn't whether the song was any good or blah, blah, blah. It was fucking Bing Crosby singing the song I wrote about them. And then she turned to me, it was so sweet, and she said, "Do you think we could get to meet him?" And I said, "Grandma, unfortunately, no," because he had dropped dead about 2 weeks before that.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I mean, these are little tidbits. But I got it,
Well, yeah, I mean, they probably could still have a chance, but they got to wait a while,
Well, they're not here, but anyway, yeah. So there was, and then obviously I've spent the last 25 or some odd years only doing films. But so I have this other history, which is why I told you a while ago when I go and I do things like when I went to Australia, because I wrote the Olympic, the NBC opening theme years ago. And I had been to Australia because when my records that I told you about happened in England, the BBC, it's on a line with New Zealand, Australia, and one other. If you have a hit in England, you're going to have a hit in Australia, New Zealand. So when I went years later, I had been to Australia way back, and they thought I was the guy doing the films, and I was the son of that guy who had been there doing the songs 25 years before that. I said, "No, it's me."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we'll have all your links, and hopefully that new single comes out before next Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll have what's her name, Eileen. Do you know Eileen?
Yeah, no, we love Eileen.
Okay, I'm going to tell you something. So I've been around and done all kinds of things. Now I just met her, literally just met her a couple of days ago, because she was involved with this company. She is a kick. She is something else. She is great. Yes. So I'm going to have her. I'll try to have her send you the 2 versions of this record.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so, yeah. Have you met her?
Unfortunately, not in person, but we've had her on the show.
You must. Yeah. To really get her, you got to meet her in person.
Oh, I'm sure.
She's really funny. And when you've done a lot of stuff, then you meet somebody. So she's like, boy, she's on it, boy. So I'm having a blast, and she does what she says, because there's so many people, especially in the record end of it, who just don't,
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, no, she's one of the good ones. She always pulls through. She's awesome.
Yeah, she is. Okay.
Well, man, it was an absolute pleasure getting to talk to you, and I'm very very hopeful for your future with your endeavors and new projects coming out.
Thank you.
Same. It was great chatting with you.
Okay, thanks. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. And remember, Ata Dionne.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, he would flip out. You just call him out of nowhere. You send him an email. I even looked just now when you told me. I have a new phone, and I don't have an email, but he's called me lots of times. It should show up on my old phone, but I don't readily see a thing. Or I'd say, okay, here's this thing. Tomorrow, send him a thing. Say you talked to Randy the other night, and you love Drop Dead Fred, and blah 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 blah. Who knows? You'll do a thing with him.
Absolutely. That's awesome.
That'd be so cool.
All right.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, take it easy.
Okay, guys. You guys be well. Take care. Good luck. And we'll do it again, or somehow we'll connect.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
You have a good one, man.
Have a great
I
night.
will.
And stay mindless, everyone.
Stay mindless.
Yeah. Mindless, baby.
Thank you for listening to the Mindless Morning Show. We appreciate you picking us out of the many great podcasts out there. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that little bell to get notified whenever we release a new episode or bonus content. Now go enjoy the rest of your mindless day.